Now, the Reserve Bank, as you know, has a new boss. Former Deputy Governor Michele Bullock will now be the 9th Governor of the RBA when she begins in September this year. She's also the first woman to ever hold the role. Here was the Prime Minister commenting on her appointment today.
The Treasurer informed the Governor of the decision where it was likely to head a couple of weeks ago. In advance as well. That's just common courtesy and decency. It's the way that my government functions. We treat people with respect, but I certainly agreed with the recommendation of Jim Chalmers, as did the entire Cabinet, unanimously.
Well, given you've met...
Michele Bullock was the outstanding appointment.
Well, joining me now is a former RBA board member, Warwick McKibbon. Warwick, wonderful to see you on the show again. Look, I'm really interested in your verdict about who Jim Chalmers and Albanese has chosen here. Michele Bullock appointed, of course, from within the RBA's ranks. They didn't go to the international circuit to try and find someone, siding with the continuity of the monetary policy that the RBA has been taking. Do you think this is the right approach?
Yeah, hi, Sharri. Great to be here. Yeah, I think they have made a good choice. A number of reasons. One is you wanted to have a continuation of the sort of policy stance that the bank has been undertaking. We're not at the end of the tightening cycle, in my view, so you do want to have some sort of continuity. And Michele also is an outstanding person. I've known her since she joined the bank in 1986. I met her in 86. She's worked for me. I just think she's very smart and she's a great economist and she's a great communicator, and that's what you need right now.
There are predictions by many economists that we could still see another 2 rate hikes this year. I mean, the inflation rate has fallen to 5.6%, but if you take out the volatile factors, underlying inflation is still around 6.4%, or it was according to the last data that we saw. Do you think we need to see the rate rises if this is where inflation is sitting?
Well, Sharri, I think it's important to point out where the inflation came from in the first place. Most of it was caused by supply disruptions coming from COVID, as well as the Ukraine invasion by Russia. On top of that, that's a supply contraction. But on top of that, there was a strong demand coming from government spending, as well as loose monetary policy. Now, what we've seen in the last few months is that the supply disruptions have really come off a lot. The markups of corporations have come down dramatically because the prices for energy and food and agriculture have really washed out of the system. So that means that we're getting a bit of a deflationary cycle coming from the overseas economies. Now, that means that we're likely to see prices falling in Australia if we do nothing with monetary policy and fiscal policy. And so I think now is the right time to pause. We probably still need to get the interest rate up relative to where it is, both because we still have high inflation and we're still much lower in interest rates than the rest of the world. But I think the data for the last few months has changed my mind as to how quickly we do need to get interest rates into the high fours.
I think that's really interesting what you say, because I know we've been seeing reports that there is deflation in China, but I haven't really seen people say that that is going to have an impact or that's going to happen here in Australia. Instead, you know, we've heard people like Angus Taylor speculate that we actually could be entering a period of stagflation. But you think inflation will fall just naturally? Is that right?
What's interesting, Sharri, yeah, that's right. If you look at the data, when during the period from 2013 to 2019, when we had inflation below the target, the governor pointed out this was a global phenomenon. So, you know, the Reserve Bank was blaming the inflation in the world as being the key driver. When inflation surged in the world, it surged in Australia. So there is a common factor that we will have the world inflation plus or minus what policies we put in place. So I think if we find low inflation in the US, which come down quite sharply, zero inflation in China, that's a benchmark for Australia. And so I think inflation will keep falling naturally because of the supply adjustment. And then the question is, how much fiscal stimulus can we take out and how much should the Reserve Bank raise rates? I don't think they need to go above 5 now, but there could be 1 or 2 more coming. Have to look at the data.
Yeah. Look, that's more of an optimistic view than we've heard in a while, so that's good news. Look, Michele Bullock, however, has said that unemployment will need to rise in order to bring down inflation. I think she's given the figure of around 4.6% in the next year or 18 months. Look, this means another 180,000 people out of work. this is going to be very difficult for a lot of families given the cost of living pressures that Australians are already experiencing.
So I don't think it's that mechanical, Sharri. I think people have this view that we have unemployment goes up, then inflation comes down, but it is possible to get inflation down and not have a major surge in unemployment. And the reason I say that, well, the US at the moment looks like it's having a soft landing without an unemployment rise and inflation's coming down. So I think if the policies are put in place carefully enough, you don't need, it's not a causation effect between more unemployment, less inflation. It's a question of managing monetary and fiscal policy to get inflation to come down while employment is less affected. So it really does depend on the decisions of the policymakers on how this trade-off unfolds.
All right, Warwick McKibbon, really appreciate your insights tonight. Thank you for your time.